This is block 4 over there, section 2, the section starting with the Lusitania. How do you beat Britain in a war? The wealthiest country in the world, with the strongest navy in the world, a huge population, and a nation that had not been defeated in war by a European power in hundreds and hundreds of years. How do you defeat Britain in a war? And the answer to that question, Germany thought, and was true, was you had to cut her off from the rest of the world. Great Britain, over here, is a hugely populated country that's very small. Britain only grows about 30 to 40% of the food it needs to survive. The rest of the food that comes into Great Britain has to come from the outside world, mostly the United States and Canada. The way to defeat the British is to starve them into submission. And the way to starve them into submission is to sink the ships carrying food. And that is what Germany tried to do. They tried to set up a blockade of Great Britain around Great Britain. But the problem is, you can't blockade Great Britain with surface ships because Great Britain has the world's most powerful navy. And they have that navy to protect their trade and to protect their food supply. So while the British Navy is in existence, which it certainly was in World War I, you cannot get at British shipping unless you perfect a new kind of technology. And here it is. This is a World War I era submarine, a U-boat, if you will. Stands for the German word undersea. A U-boat is an undersea boat, a submarine. Germany developed dozens and then hundreds of these submarines, and then it deployed them around the British Isles and began sinking ships headed for Britain, filled with food and other supplies. The problem with, so here's a submarine. Its main weapon is a torpedo. It has to sneak up on the ships that it is attacking because it's too small, too slow to do anything but fire from a secret position. So here in this painting, a submarine sneaks up on a cargo ship, fires a torpedo or two, the torpedo blows up underneath the ship, and the ship sinks. The problem is, from under the water, you can't really identify too well who it is you are shooting at. So the Germans said, look, anybody that comes around Great Britain is going to be a prime target. And that included some of the world's biggest ships. In May of 1915, when the war was not even a year old, the RMS Lusitania, one of the big competitors of the Titanic and the Olympic, from which, if you look at her, to an untrained eye, she kind of looks like Titanic. The Lusitania was sailing from New York to England, and a submarine kind of spotted her. And the submarine captain later went on to say that he thought it was Lusitania's sister ship, who was a troop ship. No one will ever know for sure. He aligned himself up and he fired a series of torpedoes into the side of this passenger ship that was carrying, about 1,200 passengers, including about 200 Americans. Lusitania sank, bringing down with it 128 American lives. And the resulting cry in the United States was significant. How dare Germany go and sink this ship? They are sinking ships filled with innocent people that have nothing to do with the war. Killed over 1,100 people, 128 Americans, and the United States was pissed off. The type of pissed off that might lead to war. President Wilson did not want war, and made it very clear to the German government that they would need to stop this. And Germany promised to stop its submarine warfare. But Germany can't stop its submarine warfare. It's the only way to beat Great Britain. The Arabic Pledge and the Sussex Pledge, which are the next aspects, or the next terms on your list, were pledges that the Germans kind of tried to pledge to the United States about sinking ships. And so the first, after Lusitania, they said, we won't sink ships on sight. We'll surface and we'll say, hi, we're here. Everybody get off in lifeboats and we're going to sink the ship. But that didn't work because the ships would simply turn around and try to outrun the U-boats or even sometimes ram them. And these submarines were not fast, they were not well protected, they were not powerful. If they did not have the elements of surprise, they wouldn't work. The Arabic Pledge and the Sussex Pledge are pledges that Germany would change the way it fought its submarine war. But in the end, there was no way to fight submarine warfare without what is known as unrestricted submarine warfare. The Germans said, we'll warn the ships. Then the Germans said, we'll only attack things that we can identify as warships. In the end, it all became too difficult for the submarine captains under the water trying to figure out who was who, and Germany kind of just said at the end, okay, anyone that goes around the British Isles is fair game. Anyone trading with Great Britain is fair game. It was the only way they saw to win the war. By 1917, the Germans know that if they go back on all of these pledges and all of these promises and declare unrestricted submarine warfare against neutral countries, the United States being a neutral country, that would draw America into the war. The Germans knew that. In 1917, Germany was faced with a question. They knew a couple things. They could not beat England without unrestricted submarine warfare. Unrestricted submarine warfare would bring the United States into the war. And the third thing that they knew was the United States Army was small and weak, and it would take at least a year to bring up to snuff to fight in Europe. So Germany took a calculated risk with its final declaration of unrestricted submarine warfare. They said, we can, in the year between the United States declaring war and the United States being able to effect the war, we can starve Britain out. So in 1917, in about February of 1917, Germany declared unrestricted submarine warfare, that any ship approaching Great Britain, no matter what it was carrying, no matter what flag it flew, would be subject to sinking. They put this into practice. American lives began to be lost at sea, and the United States took one giant leap closer to war. It would take one more thing for it to finally declare war on Germany. But unrestricted, the Lusitania, these pledges, unrestricted submarine warfare, the British blockade, they all have to do with Germany's one and only way they could see their ability to defeat Great Britain in the war, to cut off its life supply, to cut off its food. And if they did that, even if the United States declared war, they would not be able to bring an army to Europe fast enough to affect the outcome. Germany's plan came very, very close to succeeding, but in the end, did not.